I'm Andrew Hamilton, Chief Technology Officer for Cardlytics, and we're proud to sponsor the 2015 Georgia Technology Summit as a platinum sponsor. Cardlytics runs Cardlink rewards programs for over 500 banks within the US and UK. We're also leaders in the pioneering transaction-based marketing space. Speaking earlier last night to Jim, we're more of a Leaf company than a Tesla company. Our next speaker will have some insights on how we can change this. That's my hope, at least. I have the honor today to introduce John Rossman, Managing Director of the Alvarez and Marsal, and author of the Amazon Way, 14 leadership principles behind the world's most disruptive company. John specializes in multi-channel, operation scaling, technology strategy, and platform enablement in multiple industries, including retail, service, and public sector clients. With over 26 years of experience in strategy design, implementation, and operating experience, John has led several complex businesses and programs resulting in innovative business models. Please welcome John Rossman.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. What a great audience and what a needed conversation. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that there are 73 privately held companies valued at more than $1 billion. 48 entered that club last year. US venture capital raised $33 billion in 2014, up 62% year over year. These types of future investments and these types of businesses are going to be into teams and into businesses that play by a different set of rules, the rules of digital disruption. What are those rules? First, they use data and technology in ways and at speed that obliterate the value of incumbency and scale. Secondly, they fundamentally reinvent the customer experience across a value chain, and that becomes the core of their business plan. And third, and this is what makes them such a pesky competitor for traditional incumbents, is they can invest big and they can invest long-term, focusing first on adoption and customer delight, and then on revenue, and then on profitability. Here's my screen, perfect. So in case you need some further evidence, the Fortune 1000 is simply a stack rank list of companies by revenue. Not only is the turnover high, but it's accelerating. 75% of these captains of industry will turn over this decade. Why? Often it's because they fail to be entrepreneurial and they fail to reinvent themselves. So I've been a partner, a managing director at Alvarez & Marsal for just about 10 years. Prior to A&M, I worked at Amazon for 4 years. I got to run 2 businesses at Amazon. I got to launch and scale the third-party selling business at Amazon. So that's third-party selling at Amazon.com. Today, that's over 42% of all units shipped and sold, over 3 million sellers supported on that platform. The second business I got to run was the enterprise services business, where we ran other large retailers' e-commerce infrastructure for them. So I had responsibility for Toys R Us, for Target.com, for Marks & Spencer's in the UK, Sears Canada, and a number of other great brands. When I transitioned from Amazon to Alvarez & Marsal, I started to see the impact of the strategies, the stories, the anecdotes from Amazon that they would have with my clients as I was helping them through change. The journey of the book started for me. I wrote one piece that's an appendix in the book called Future Ready Self-Service, and I sent it to a number of my clients. One of my clients at the Gates Foundation, Greg, ran advocacy for the Gates Foundation. So think of marketing and communications in a typical company. And Greg's a journalist by background. And he called me into his office and he goes, "John, this is really good. And then he gave me like the 10 things that I should have done better, reminding me that he was an editor by background. And I said, Greg, if you like that story, I've got 40 more stories like Future Ready Self-Service that I use. And he goes, you ought to write a book. And Greg ran Bill Gates' 2 book projects for him. And I said, Greg, I'm the worst possible candidate for writing a book. I'm an engineer and I'm a consultant. The extent is bullet points for me at this point. And he goes, no, John, we can do this. So I hired a contract writer, I hired an editor, and I hired a lawyer. And about a year later, the book came out. I gave myself 2 design principles when I was starting this project. And those 2 principles were, first, that somebody could read it on one plane ride with a glass of wine. And secondly, I was only going to work on it on a plane with a glass of wine. Fortunately, I had plenty of plane rides that year, but the book and this discussion is really about the lessons from one of the largest disruptors in the world and how they can be used and adopted for others. I usually give a bit of a disclaimer, which is in no way do I propose or put forward that Amazon's principles in either totality or individually are the right principles for any other team. But the fact that they're articulated, that they're consistent, that they can be used at a tactical level actually is one of the key mechanisms by which Amazon scales their leadership and avoids bureaucracy in their organization. So the first leadership principle of Amazon is customer obsession. Leaders start with the customer and work backwards. They work vigorously every day to earn and keep customer trust. And leaders pay attention to competitors, but they obsess about customers. I think the most interesting word in all of that is that word obsession. Most people talk about customer focus, customer intimacy. Customer obsession means something different. Obsession means an irrational or almost bizarre orientation and focus on something. And I don't think that most teams, most companies really understand when you start taking on an obsessive point of view, you are willing to tackle problems in a different way, you're willing to make bets in a different way, and you approach your orientation and the decisions you make in a different way. Who would guess what Amazon's biggest concern, biggest fear, Jeff's biggest fear about his business is? A lot of people would guess Google. I think Alibaba is a great answer. Jeff's biggest fear about Amazon is bureaucracy and organizational span, and that it will get in the way of being customer obsessed. So a lot of things that they do within the organization are to counterbalance and to help avoid the calcification and the bureaucracy of a large organization. One powerful tool that they use is a Voice of the Customer program. Anybody here use a Voice of the Customer program? Amazon's got, I think, some real interesting lessons about a Voice of the Customer program. First is that Voice of the Customer program is enterprise in nature. The whole goal is that your organization, your approach, your product lines, your channels don't matter to customers. And so having the Voice of the Customer program be organizationally aligned is, by definition, works against that. So have your Voice of the Customer program be enterprise in nature. Secondly is you have to create lots of mechanisms, lots of approaches, lots of intakes for where the ideas can come from your customers, from your competitors, from your channels, from your employees, from lots of data sources. So you really have to be thoughtful about creating creative intake mechanisms and how you cull through those. But here's the most important thing that Amazon does. The leader of the Voice of the Customer program, with the right process, the right hygiene, the right data, that leader is able to put prioritized work on any and all teams at Amazon in order to tackle an important customer issue that otherwise isn't getting the proper attention. And I think that's the key to the Amazon Voice of the Customer program. I oftentimes get asked, what do I think is the most unique principle, or what defines Amazon the most other than customer obsession. And I think it's this principle, invent and simplify. But what I think is most interesting about this principle, because I think most companies would have left it at invent, and then simplify would be, a sub-paragraph and a sub-bullet point under this principle, but that they cherish and they value simplification as much as invention. Why? The key goal of any operational leader at Amazon is to be able to scale their business. And they realized early on that the key to scaling is simplifying processes and simplifying approaches. Simple has better quality, has better cost, has better throughput, has better scaling capability. And so as you're thinking about your processes on all the compensating and edge use cases that you develop and everything, really focus on how do we simplify those requirements, because that will be the key to scaling. The other thing about invent and simplify that I think is a story that a lot of people can use is tackling the worst customer experience. Who here has an Amazon phone? So that's a real problem, different story. But on the Amazon phone and on the Kindle HDX, I can't imagine as a phone or a tablet user a worse possible experience than having to do something really simple, which is, I need to ask a question, something isn't working. How do I do that? Do I contact the tablet manufacturer? Do I contact the application owner? Do I contact my data provider? My guess is that 95% of all customer questions about a phone or tablet scenario go unasked because we don't even know how to start the conversation. Amazon recently launched a feature that I think demonstrates that they looked at what the worst customer experience is and they decided to solve for it and leapfrog it. It's a feature called Mayday. Has anybody seen Mayday? Mayday is a feature on your tablet or on your phone where you can press a button, an assistant, a live assistant comes up with your permission, has access to your device, can access and demonstrate 90% of all customer questions that you're going to have. I think for a company that is renowned for self-service, they saw a situation and a customer need where they had to change their orientation towards self-service, and they completely leapfrogged the typical approach to this. And as we'll talk about, my guess is they'll figure out a way to turn Mayday into another business. Another great approach that Amazon takes to create change and gain clarity is when they start an important initiative, a project, a new feature, a capability, is they start with a future press release. Has anybody here ever used or heard about a future press release approach? So I've seen a number of organizations use it. Amazon, of course, has a unique recipe for how they do a future press release. Here's the key. First is write your future press release at a point of time after launch. Most companies write them for the point of launch of a feature of a service, which is mildly interesting. Write it at a point in time where you've had success. So it's in the future, a year after launch. The first thing you do is you describe why do customers love this capability? What delighted them about this service and capability? The second thing you'd do is you'd outline some of your core business case and the metrics that you use to evaluate the success and the customer delight. The third piece is the real key to the future press release, though. In the third piece, you outline the big problems that you had to solve for, the issues that you had to tackle, the big rocks that you had to push along the way. You don't describe how you solved for them or how you accomplished them because you haven't done that yet. You simply get on paper the challenges that have to be addressed. Most often those are internal organizational challenges. With that future press release, then the organization is better able to communicate what the initiative is, gain enthusiasm, but the real key is you give that future press release to a leader, and across the organization, that leader is able to take that future press release and drive for the success factors that are outlined. I wrote the future press release for the third-party selling business at Amazon. There was one key line in that that gave me the license to go across the organization and get things done. And that sentence was, a third-party seller in the middle of the night without talking to anybody will be able to register, list an item, fulfill an order to delight a customer in the same way that Amazon the retailer does. It's a simple but really powerful sentence about what the vision and the obligation of what the third-party selling business needed to provide to a seller. I used that. There was, I think, 48 teams that I had to interface with just to get the registration pipeline done, the self-service registration pipeline done for a seller. I would take that future press release and drive commitment and delivery for everything that needed to be done using that future press release. So again, it's a way to de-emphasize organizational structure, not respect the traditions of organizational structure as much, but enable teams to get important things done that impact customers. One of the important concepts that you'll hear Amazon talk a lot about is being a platform business. I was at Amazon from early 2002 through late 2005, so just about 4 years. One of the things that we got really clear at Amazon during that time was that we were essentially two types of companies. We were a retailer and we were a platform business. And that platform business was there to serve both Amazon the retailer plus lots of other clients. What does a platform business do? A platform business provides valuable services to other enterprises and entities. But there's two key capabilities that Amazon really focuses on that. One was they need to be self-service in manner. I shouldn't have to talk to somebody in order to use your stuff. And secondly is that not only could others use it, but others could innovate on top of it without you even knowing about it, right? And so it was a way to outsource innovation. Lots of companies have opportunities to become a platform business. But even if you don't go down the path of being a platform business, considering what your core capabilities are and asking the question, if we were to have external clients for this capability, how would we make them world-class enough so that we could have external clients, is an amazing forcing function. Everybody here is familiar with AWS, Amazon Web Services, cloud computing. Most people would guess that that started with a strategy, an insight that we could turn the traditional technology business upside down. It didn't. When I was at Amazon, teams owned everything, the entire stack of product capability. You owned everything from product definition, product roadmap, to application engineering, to infrastructure management. We got to a point where we just weren't realizing the scale or the efficiency on the infrastructure side that we should. So we said, hey, we're going to separate application teams from the infrastructure teams. And the infrastructure team said, hey, we're going to provide all the application people out there. We'll provide you with some tools and interfaces so that you can forecast, provision, and manage your infrastructure needs, not having to talk to us. And I literally remember a meeting with, a big meeting with Jeff, and he goes, this is such a fantastic idea, but here's the problem. The application teams are internal customers, and you people all know each other. Internal customers are not demanding customers. I'm going to force the infrastructure team to make this good enough to have external customers. And so when they did, they made it world-class enough that it served the needs of the Amazon application teams, but they discovered that developers love this capability, and that's how the AWS business was started and invented. This is Amazon's well-known, long-term, flywheel, dynamic model of their business. It actually is used, still used, to help understand, rationalize investments in their business. If you look at Amazon's business, it actually probably has some new flywheels. I think Prime is a flywheel of its own, well beyond the loyalty program now. But as I work with a lot of clients and in these disruptive business models, they tend to be more open in nature, they tend to be platform in nature, and ecosystems become much more important. And it's amazing to me always that companies, leaders, they have a good understanding of the individual components of their business, and they may understand aspects or articulated aspects of the importance of the ecosystem, but they really haven't taken the time to develop a systems dynamic model of the entire value chain in which they participate in, to see the disruptive opportunities, to see the opportunities for where partners could help bring you leverage and opportunity, where there are risks relative to your business model. And so one of the things, and it's can be a fun exercise, but take the time to truly build a system dynamic view of the broader value chain that you participate in, and you will gain insight that will help you disrupt that value chain. So I get asked a lot about, so how does Amazon do it? Amazon is really a complex company. I had to write down a list of all the businesses that I think Amazon is in today. They really are a conglomerate business today, and that flywheel helps rationalize all the pieces. But here's the businesses that Amazon is in today. They're obviously a retailer, 30 some odd categories, by the way. They're an apparel designer and manufacturer. They're a consumer products designer and manufacturer. They run the world's largest marketplace business. They're a 3PL logistics provider. They're a robotic supply chain company. They're a payments innovator. They're a publisher. They're a content creator. They're an on-demand printer. They're a cloud technology company. They're a tablet, phone, and other device designer and manufacturer. They're a B2B distributor. Those are just the ones that I could easily rattle off, and there's more in multiple brands. What businesses might Amazon get into next? And I'm guessing at this. Financial services, insurance, healthcare, on-demand manufacturing, and many more. How do they do that? Amazon typically starts in a value chain in one space and then goes upstream and downstream to find the opportunities of leverage and where customers are trapped and the customer experience can be reinvented. Many people, I'm guessing, are familiar with an industry value chain analysis. Michael Porter has written a lot about it. It's a great way to admire an industry, typically looking backwards. But I think starting with a value chain view of the broader industry that you participate in is a great first step. But then I think companies, disruptive companies, ask a set of questions once they understand that value chain. First is they ask, who are the gatekeepers? Jim talked a lot about some of the gatekeepers in the auto industry that I found very interesting. So gatekeepers are organizations and entities that essentially are there to maintain the status quo. So regulators, associations, accreditations, publishers are a good example. They essentially put barriers in place between customers and innovators, and they are essentially motivated to maintain the status quo. So understand the gatekeepers, and you'll find opportunity for disruption. Secondly is, disruptors always ask, are there middlemen and brokers in the value chain? Those business models are fundamentally under siege from disruptors. They will continue to be, and brokers and middlemen are obviously faced with the challenge of, how do I provide higher value than simply connecting people together and being a distributor? Look at where selection and demand is disaggregated. This is the classic marketplace business model, but it can be articulated in many ways. Customers love it when you bring together disaggregated supply and disaggregated demand together. Proven disruptive business model. Part of what you can do with that disruptive business model is bring pricing transparency. Where there is a lack of pricing transparency in a value chain, there is a disruptive business opportunity. Think about how the travel industry has been changed simply by bringing pricing transparency. Can the provisioning and ownership model be changed? This is really the secret of cloud capability in AWS. They fundamentally took what was traditionally an operating expense and they shifted it, a capital expense, and they shifted it to an operating expense, something that was difficult to provision to make it on demand, something that was difficult to operate to an as-a-service model. So think about how to fundamentally change the provisioning and operating model for a capability and shift it to as a service. Great disruptive business opportunities. And finally, and it all starts here, is can the customer experience be reinvented across a broad value chain? The buying experience, the operating experience, and make it self-service. The 14th principle of the Amazon leadership principles is deliver results. And I can attest to you that leaders are expected to deliver hard results despite setbacks at Amazon. Again, in the spirit of avoiding bureaucracy and driving towards accountability, Amazon doesn't let leaders do this when results don't materialize. So one of the things that I learned at Amazon was this whole concept around managing dependencies. What's a dependency? A dependency is basically a reliance on another team or another vendor or partner to bring something critical to you on which your results are dependent upon. Two key tricks that I learned at Amazon to help manage dependencies better are this. First is this concept of trust but verify. Think about the normal status or update meetings you do with internal teams or with other partners and service providers, and you ask, how are things going? What's the status, right? And the typical polite conversation that goes on is, things are great, we're all green, here are things lining up. At Amazon, the conversation continues. You are expected to have the rude conversation and ask deeper and deeper questions and become their partner in helping to manage their project and their risks. And when the entire organization understands that this is the obligation and this is how we operate, it no longer becomes a personal issue, right? That rudeness isn't a personal rudeness. We all do this together. And so if you want a high-performing organization organized with small teams, but where those small teams have a lot of dependencies, adopt an approach of trust and verify. Here's the other thing that every team at Amazon, this is how a leader manages their business with any other team. Our relationship, our conversation is based on and always starts with metrics and SLAs. That is how our relationship works together. And so every service provider within Amazon, to both internal customers and external customers, that conversation is based on a contract of metrics and SLAs. So turn every dependency that you have, if you don't have a weekly conversation and a deep understanding of the metrics that are important to you, and if you can't get yourself on a road path to establishing SLAs or those commitments of service delivery, quality, speed, cost, throughput, you're not managing your dependencies in a way that a leader at Amazon would manage their dependencies. So what's the typical rationalization for why hard change doesn't happen in a larger organization? The typical rationalization is typically some form of, this is the way we do things here. This is what's made us successful, right? I recently saw an interview with Charlie Rose and Jeff Bezos, and Charlie asked Jeff, are you concerned about somebody else disrupting you? And Jeff gave, I thought, a very humble and an insightful answer to that question, and it was this. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. and all I'm trying to do is make it so it's not in my lifetime. And I think that all of this starts for leaders, boards, CEOs, with truly accepting that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and adopting that disruptive mindset. So I hope I've given you today a few strategies, a few tactics, but most importantly, some inspiration as you set about disrupting your future. Okay, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the time.
It's very disruptive. Thank you for doing things.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. I hope I can get this through TSA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Like you want this. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.